Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I am so excited to have Executive Director, Life Coach, and Nonprofit Leader, Dr. J.C. Montenegro with us today. Dr. J.C., thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you for this opportunity to share who we are and what we do for the community.
I can't wait to learn more. I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. J.C. and then we'll get right into the questions. Dr. J.C. Montenegro is an executive director, life coach, and nonprofit leader with over 20 years of experience in youth development and community empowerment. Currently serving as the executive director of the Salesian Youth Center in Los Angeles, he has led the organization through significant challenges, securing funding and increasing donor engagement to ensure long-term sustainability. Dr. Montenegro holds a PhD in sociology and an MBA with specialized training in youth ministry. He has also played a pivotal role in international social initiatives, including developing a strategic plan for Red America Social Salesians and launching volunteer programs in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Tijuana. Bilingual in English and Spanish, Dr. Montenegro is dedicated to mentoring the next generation of leaders and creating sustainable nonprofit solutions that foster personal growth and community development. Welcome, Dr. JC.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So excited to find out more about what you're doing, helping youth in especially today's climate after COVID and in this political climate. You have an amazing career, and you have dedicated this career to supporting disadvantaged youth. Share with us what sparked your passion for working with youth.
I was one of those troublemaker kids. So when I was a child, I actually have dyslexia. I suffer dyslexia. And that, in a sense, growing up, kept me away from the normal things. You know, you need to be a good student, you have good grades, and everybody will be happy with you. But when you don't fit in the academic system per se, you feel that rejection, you feel that you don't belong to something. And in a sense, thanks to the Salesians and the educational system that they have, I was able to find myself through an experience that I did in the middle of the Amazon jungle. So I went to the Amazon jungle as a teacher when I was 18 years old as a volunteer missionary. Wow. And that changed my life, because from that moment, I understood what it meant to study. I understood that I was good for something. And thanks to that is when I started, in a sense, trying to give back. So what am I doing here is basically doing what someone else did it for me, is that gratification. And I think so many times in our culture, we are not grateful. You know, there are people who help us out and then we forget about where we come from and, you know, we live our life and we're happy ever after. But I think there is something beautiful when you actually are giving back, you know, realizing where you come from, what are your roots, and who were the people who were there to help you out to get out of it, and how you can actually give back to others who are in the same situation that you may have.
I love that. Do you have one particular mentor that you're very, very grateful for?
I think there is a whole system, and that is the beautiful thing about the Salesians. It's not one person who has made the difference in your life, but it's a combination of people who have been there and made the difference in your life. Like, for example, when I was a little kid, I think my dad has a lot to do because he has walked with me through my whole life, my dad and my mom. But in those moments where my dad and my mom didn't know how to deal with me, when I was 12 years old, 13, 14, there was this priest whose name is Antonio Hernandez, who was helping me at that process. And then when I became 18 years old and I went to the Amazon jungle, there was this priest, his name is Domingo Botasso, who was there accompanying with Silvio Broseghini. And then when I got out of the mission, there was Juan Botasso who also accompanied me. So in a sense, the system, the environment is what helped me to grow. And that is why it's so important. I think there is a saying in Africa, that to raise a child, you need a tribe. And it's so true. There's not only one person who is making the difference, but it's a combination of everybody who is supporting the child to become the best that they can be.
Well, it sounds like, and they also say it takes a village. It sounds like the entire village or the tribe was there for you, and you've created a tribe of your own or a village of your own to help the next generation forward. So what do you think are the most pressing challenges that disadvantaged youth face today, especially in light of the pandemic and what's happening politically?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we are suffering right now is social media. I mean,
Yes.
the fact that young people have unlimited access to anything and everything that they can imagine is unbelievable. The fact that many of these social media platforms per se, they're addictive. If you really think about it, I mean, for adults, I can speak about myself. Sometimes I will be in these social medias, like scrolling up and down, and I can spend hours. Imagine someone who is 12, 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yes.
And this is really interesting. You can ask any young person right now, what is the average screen time that you have, that the phones give it to you? And many young people have 7, 8, 9, 12 hours of screen time. And you wonder, where do they get those hours if they're in school, and why not? Well, sometimes they don't sleep well. So
Yes.
I think part of the problem, and this is not only for disadvantaged youth, it's actually for every single young person, is the fact that we have given too much freedom, in my opinion, in the sense of social media. When the child is in the restaurant, walk to any restaurant, and there is a child 4 or 5 years old. If they're quiet, it's because they are in the tablet.
Yes.
And I think, to me, that is the major issue that I realize now. And how can we get them out of it?
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is not only that you are addicted to this, but developmental, you don't develop in the same way. Like, for example, when I was a little kid, we were outside playing, talking to friends, making sure that we deal with bullying or how they treat each other and why not. Now these kids are on their phones. Their ability to communicate, their ability to speak, their ability to share their feelings has happened to me that many times I'm not able to find out what is going on with them when they text me. How are you feeling? They cannot put into words, but when they text you, they can text you how they feel.
Yes.
So to me, I think those are critical components that as a society, we need to be aware. We need to be mindful. We need to say, I mean, we're giving a phone to a 12 years old. What do we expect?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is no any type of filter in what is being shown. And in reality, social media, what it does is they provide what you want to see.
Of course.
So, for example, if you...
Or maybe not even what you want to see, what you've been looking at, and then they give you more of that. And that sends them down a rabbit hole, and that affects their mental health. That's what I saw, especially during the pandemic. We saw such a rise in depression and anxiety. Kids who are also having to be on Zoom all the time were having difficulties with, body image, dysmorphia, so many difficulties. I'm also wondering, aside from social media, are there any challenges that are particular to right now rather than kind of all the time that you're seeing with the youth you're working with?
I think with the young people that we work with, many of them come from Hispanic immigrant families. So even they were born here or they came when they were little kids. So their parents, they need to really work really hard to be able to survive.
Yes.
Now, we live in Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, the living expenses are huge. I mean, So to be able to live in a house per se, you need to pay what, $3,000-4,000 a month.
Yeah.
And to be able to get that money to pay, you need to have two jobs, and dad and mom needs to work. So I think that is another of the challenges that I see, that many of these parents have been working really hard to be able to survive. Now, if you cannot survive in one room, or you don't have enough money to pay, you bring someone else. So many of the families that we work with, they sleep in the couch. They don't have a room.
Yeah.
They share the room with 3 or 4 people. So this is something that has become kind of like the norm for some of the young people that we work with. Talking about immigration, right now with the whole political statements that we have in regards of immigration. So you have kids who have been born here, but the whole existence is, or raising up, the cultural is from other countries. And then they are in fear that their parents are going to be deported.
Yes.
So there is a lot of social dynamics that are difficult to sometimes to understand.
Yes.
The other thing that I'm seeing a lot is a lot of mental health.
Yes.
But I think that is part of the consequence of social media as well. But a lot of mental health. I mean, the families are way more smaller than before. Like
Yes.
in my family, we were 3, but between the 3 of us, we fought, we discussed everything. Now, sometimes you have families of 1 child, 2 children, and then the ability to communicate, to develop with other people their age is a really interesting dynamic. So what we try to provide is a place for them to get those things that they cannot get at home. Like, you are here, you need to talk to someone, you need to be able to negotiate what you want, you need to speak to convince your thoughts. And so it's a beautiful dynamics where we provide to the young people that we have opportunities that in other cases they won't.
Yes, I love that. And I think, they feel so disempowered. I do think it's probably even worse now in the political climate. I used to do some work at 2nd Street Elementary down in Boyle Heights, and have worked in this neighborhood a lot. And so those challenges have always been there, but I can imagine that the fear of ICE and what's happening, what could happen to their parents, is really disempowering for them. And I know that you are very big in terms of trying to empower these kids. So how do you approach this way, like the way that you empower them? How do you do that? And how does that foster long-term growth?
I think one of the main skills that we need to learn, especially nowadays, is listening skills. We don't listen. And as a parent, sometimes we just tend to tell how things are, like we were raised, but we don't listen. And I think we are in an era where we need to be really attentive of listening. We need to ask them questions. We need to allow them to fall. I think part of the problems that we have as a society is that we don't allow our children to fall. If something happened, we need to be careful. We need to take care of them. It's like, no, sometimes, making mistakes is actually a beautiful experience, Yesterday, I was actually talking to one of the parents, and she was disappointed because something happened in the school, and the kid was asked to leave the school, and she was upset. And I was telling her, maybe this is a beautiful opportunity for your child to know that there is consequences about your behaviors. So if this happens, instead of blaming everybody else, let's assume responsibility of where we are, and let's try to make it work. So I think sometimes we are so polarized between what is right and what is wrong. There are things that happen, and those things actually become something beautiful. Like myself, if I wouldn't have dyslexia, I probably wouldn't be here.
Oh,
Simple
absolutely.
as that. I probably will be doing my business, making money, and why not? But the fact that I had this situation in my life actually moved me to a different reality. And I think that is one of the challenges that we need to see as an adults, is being able to help them out, to empower, to find what is it that they are called to be, not to do.
Well, how do you let them fall? I think that those two skills, learning how to listen and learning from mistakes, are invaluable, and I think is probably more of our part of our generation. I grew up as part of the latchkey generation, so we were just left to our own devices, and we had to figure it out. But how do you do that under a structured environment like at Salesian?
I think I'm a father too. I have a 21 years old, and with him, before him, it was interesting because I thought that I was the superhero, the good. Oh my goodness! I mean, you read the resume, and it's impressive. And then when you go with your own child and you realize that sometimes you feel like a failure because it's like, you do all this for other people, and yet with your own child, you cannot even do it. I think the reality in my case is they need to understand that everything that they do has consequences. And I think that is to me the biggest change. In my time, it was not consequences, it was punishment. If you do something wrong, you will be punished. But the punish is someone else, giving you what you need to do. But when you're talking about consequences, it's actually starting a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I have my son that he's like, I want to have a credit card because I'm working and we want to build the credit, and why not? I say, well, if you have the credit card, these are the realities of what can happen. He needs to deal with his own consequences. And sometimes as a father, the only thing that you need to say is, I'm here to support you, I love you, but you ended up in that situation. You have to take care of that situation. And if you want me to help you, what is the conditions? How can we work that out together? Like if there is a child who is having an issue in the school, instead of going to the school trying to defend your child, go and ask what happened. It's like, what's going on? What is it? But I think so many times we are so blind to our children, the best thing that have ever happened in the world, that we forget that what happened when we are not there.
Right.
And that is my question. Many times that I give conferences, like, do you train your child to be self-sufficient the moment that you are not there? Mm-hmm. Because that will happen. Mm-hmm. We hope that is later than sooner, but that will happen. But how are we training them so they can be sufficient, so they can speak for themselves, so they can defend their arguments, their point of view, and they can present who they are?
So it sounds like a lot of your work is also working with the parents as well as the kids.
When they allow us to work with the parents, because I think so many times the parents also, they are so busy making money and making sure that everybody's fine and they have the minimum provider that they are one stop and call them out is, hey, I'm upside, can you send my kid? So a lot has to do. And even in my ministry, I think I have been trying to reach out to the parents as well, because at the end we are a society.
Yes.
And I don't think sometimes we understand that is we as a entity, if we are not connected with other people, we're not going anywhere. I mean, yes. You have less impact per se.
Yes, as a therapist, it was part of our work to call in the parents and help them understand what was going on with their child, help them with parenting techniques. And I think that just goes along with your whole notion of it's a village. We all need to help each other out. And oftentimes parents, especially hardworking parents that are working maybe even multiple jobs, don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth to even think about the structure that their child needs. But there's a lot of very simple ways that you can give the child structure. And it sounds like your work is mostly with the children and helping and giving them inspiration and helping them feel empowered, and then helping them learn how to listen and also how to communicate. That's so beautiful. And I think, it speaks to a larger systemic issue, what we're seeing with today's youth. And I think that comes from the educational system. What do you think needs to be reformed? If you could name a couple things, I'm sure that there's a million things in current educational system, especially in light of them trying to dismantle the Department of Education and so forth.
I would just ask one simple question. Is the same way how we used to receive classes is the same way how my parents used to receive classes? Mm-hmm. And in the same way probably my grandparents used to receive classes. So the reality is the educational system hasn't changed.
Yes.
It's the same system. It has been the same system for so many years. And the reality is we are in a different era. We are in a different way of doing things. We're in a different dynamics. And if we don't change the way how we help the young people to interact, to talk, to those type of things, it's difficult. Even when you're trying, and I wanted to mention this before, when I empower young people, I empower them to have voice, to talk, and to say and to what they believe. But it's interesting because sometimes when they are empowered enough, sometimes they don't think the same way that you think.
Right.
And then how you do it? So you empower them only when you, in the things that are convenience to you?
Right.
Or you empower them in all the way and help them to think and to be critical? And then is the part of the adult that sometimes we don't like. It's like, how do we call them out? You know, or how do we bring them to the table and say, this is what I'm seeing, what's going on? And I think that is why I was saying the listening part and the dialogue, you know? But in the educational system right now, going back to your question, is if you are good memorizing, you pass. If you are not good memorizing or something happened, then you have an issue. But you know, how many people know how to write an essay? That's actually really interesting.
Yes.
You know, how many people can actually come and write a nice essay or sharing feelings?
Without ChatGPT.
Without ChatGPT, that, you know. So I think those are the things that, you know, I see beautiful things in the educational system. The other day I was in a class that they were teaching how to cook. You know, that's something that we never probably will imagine in our time. And I think is great. But in another parts as well is like, what's going on? I think there is a lot of things that has to be. We need to redefine how do we want to teach. What is the outcomes that we want? And I am not in that sense an expert, or I can tell you, oh, this is what I will do, because there has to be a process thinking where we go into the field and say, okay, what do we want from our young people? Because if you really think about it, education, it came out of the kings. You know, the kings wanted to educate their children, and that was part of the education system that they started.
Right.
Now, for us, education is interesting. More people live longer, so we don't have as many jobs as you used to have. So education is part of the system where you can be trained before you go to the work. But where are we at now? I think we need to really do a
well, I do think that critical thinking is something that is lacking in most educational programs, because the focus is so much on testing. And like you said, if you can memorize, if you can test well, then you perform well. But what is that going to do for you if you just have a bunch of facts sitting in your head and you don't even know how to use them? So that would be my hope, is that, you know, what do we do with this information? What do we do with what we're memorizing? How do we learn from it? Especially, how do we learn from history? Because I don't think we're necessarily learning that much. But it sounds like so much reform needs to be made. But at least at the very smallest amount, just helping children learn how to be better critical thinkers will help them be more adaptable, especially if they do stumble and fall and fail and need to figure out how to learn from that.
One of the things that you right now when you're speaking brings to my mind is the polarization that we have. We cannot sit in the same table and talk about politics, for example.
Yes.
Because many people are not willing.
Yes.
And the problem with that is, as soon as you are not capable to disagree with someone else, then we have an issue.
Yeah.
Because the critical thinking and everything goes to back up what you beliefs are. I was reading this book the other day, this audiobook, that was saying that the same way the body reacts or used to react when a bird will chase you down is the same way your body reacts when someone is in disagreeing or challenging your beliefs.
Wow.
Think about it.
Yes.
So right now, for example, even in our culture, it's unbelievable. As soon as someone is pro or against, there is no conversation.
Yes.
There is no dialogue to see what it is, but it's actually, I'm trying to convince you what I believe is right. And I think part of the problem is in our culture, we are so sensitive about things. Microaggressions.
Yes.
If someone said something and you take it as a microaggression, oh my goodness, no. So in my time, these concepts of microaggressions or things didn't exist. You need to survive where you are, and you need to be who you are, and then you need to. So I think.
Well, I also think that civilized dialogue between people who are opposing each other, you know, politically, like in the 80s, Yeah, there were plenty of disagreements, and nobody was, necessarily seeing each other's side, but the way that they communicated, I think, was different. It was a lot more respectful, and I think when you throw respect out the window, then nobody's going to listen. And that, I think, is a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. But once again, we go back to the point on how do we communicate? How are we able to listen to others? Yeah. Because normally when someone is speaking, already someone is thinking about what am I going to answer.
Right.
And working with young people, you can't. I mean, if you really want to help them out to grow, help them out to see things differently, you have to have a clear understanding of who you are, first of all. And second of all, there's like, allow them to be.
Yes.
And that means that even if you are not in agreement, how can you be in a point that you understand each other?
Yes. Well, we're going to get much more into this in the second half of this episode, but we're out of time for this half. But please tune in for the next half of this incredible episode with Executive Director, Life Coach, and Nonprofit Leader, Dr. JC Montenegro. Thank you, JC.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.